icons like Martin. We have icons like Marcus and icons like Malcolm. Reverend Dillon is one of those icons because he's moving us towards economic independence in this country. And we want to give him a round of applause. Thank you, Reverend Dillon. As you may know, ACCI is an acronym for the Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement. Sometimes people misspell it and say Harlem Congregation. It's Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement because ACCI is a coalition of houses of worship that were formed in the Harlem community as a coalition to come together to address the inequities and the blight and crime in the Harlem community in the early 1980s. We know that Harlem and other communities in New York City suffered from a twin devastation in the form of heroin addiction, in the form of crack addiction. And as a result, our communities were blighted to an unbelievable condition. But it was the houses of worship, the churches, the ministers, men and women, the other houses of worship who came together in the early 1980s and started to plan. They approached the administration at the time, and I believe it was the Koch administration, who didn't believe that the churches could come together to do anything as a force for good, that they were too fractured and too fragmented, because there was a legacy of that. But ACCI came together formally in 1986. So over 37 years, we've been working in the community as a coalition of houses of worship, churches, synagogues, temples, mosques, to improve the Harlem community. And Harlem is unrecognizable for those who were here in the 1980s. In fact, New York City is unrecognizable because New York City was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Harlem was not, in any good condition. So I'd like you to, applaud the houses of worship, the ministers, men and women, many of who are here, Dr. Carl Washington, who were here at the time. Because without them, we would not have such a successful revitalization of the enclaves of African Americans and Latinos Americans. Did you know there was a time when the sanitation department did not pick up garbage in East Harlem? It was the young lords who said, we're going to do it ourselves, and embarrassed the city of New York to start to pick up garbage in East Harlem. That was the state of affairs we were in prior to ministers like Reverend Dillon and others, iconic ministers, that took the initiative to change the conditions of our community. But as the president and CEO, as serving as the president and CEO for the last 7 years, and have been member of ACCI for over 20 years, it is my honor to bring, really, what tantamounts is an update on our activities. Because ACCI is transparent, and it's my position that we should report out to our community and our constituents every step of the way. So in our affordable housing initiatives, we are now in production for 150 additional cooperative homeownership apartments. And we're doing so in partnership with funders like LISC, like the Community Preservation Corporation, like HBD. And last week, we were able to convert a co-op where a 96-year-old Harlem resident, Miss Ida Glover, were able to purchase her apartment. Please give Ms. Glover a round of applause. And she said to us, well, now I need estate planning. That's wonderful. We've built over 5,000 units of affordable housing over a 36-year period. That is leveraging over $500 million in financing and assets. We have an award-winning homeownership program that's led by one of our staffers, Reverend Dr. Charles Butler, in partnership with Chase Bank and many other funders. Our economic development mission consists of large-scale projects as well as small-scale projects. One of the largest scale projects that we're involved in at ACCI is the Victoria Hotel and Affordable Housing Tower on the iconic 125th Street in Harlem. That hotel will have a 211 rooms, keys, we call them, and the housing has 190 mixed-income rental apartments on 126th Street. That is a $200 million project. We've also committed to partnership with workforce initiatives with Dr. Boudreau from the City University, City College, and he stepped out, but he spoke about that earlier. And we also have done a fair amount of business incubation. Some of the organizations ACCI has helped to incubate was the Balm and Gilead, which was a early HIV and AIDS organization. The Jackie Robinson Park Conservancy, which really took over the Jackie Robinson Park in Harlem, which was a no man and no woman's land when I was growing up, and now that is a flourishing city-owned park where children are playing freely in that park. We also developed what we call the Bradhurst Merchants Association, which is now a coalition of 50 Harlem-based businesses who are thriving and working with each other to support their initiatives as business owners. During the pandemic, we've always been in the health and wellness initiative space at ACCI. In fact, ACCI was one of the first organizations to involve itself in the HIV and AIDS crisis, and we've been operating a case management services and housing program for people living with HIV and AIDS for 30 years, funded by New York City Human Resource Administration. But during the pandemic, we pivoted in partnership with academic institutions, research organizations, and businesses. So we now have over $5 million in federally funded National Institute of Health grants that focuses on COVID-19 clinical trials for chronic diseases in our community, diabetes, liver cancer, and prostate cancer. And those grants will support our staff and community health workers for the next 10 years. So we're now focusing on NYCHA housing in the North Bronx and also in Brooklyn. We have some expansion projects that we're working on, and our board of directors were gracious enough to support me in this initiative, but we're now not only operating in New York City, but we've adopted new bylaws to allow us to operate throughout New York State as well as throughout the country. So we now are currently developing 250 units of affordable housing in Atlanta, Georgia. We closed in December of 2021, and we're in construction. And that is the 250 units of a 600-unit development project, all for very low and low-income families. We also partner with other houses of worship in Columbia, South Carolina, where we're now building 200 units of low-income housing tax credit affordable units in that city and state. That is innovation for ACCI as we expand our mission throughout the country. And we've also worked with a coalition of houses of worship, Reverend Jeffries in Seattle, Washington, for the New Hope Baptist Church, which I had a chance was invited to give a speech in January of 2020, right before we were notified that the pandemic was going to hit us. And they are now building condominium housing and fighting with the city for a tract of land that was taken from them through eminent domain in the early 70s, and we're supporting them. So ACCI is now positioned not only to operate its own 120 building portfolio, but we are positioned ourselves to be technical assistance for any organization within New York and without New York that needs the technical assistance and support. And one of the things that has uniquely been a benefit of ACCI's long tenure in the affordable housing arena is that every state of the union has an allocation for low-income housing tax credits that can be used to fuel affordable housing. But they also have a restriction in every state called a qualified allocation plan. And that qualified allocation plan says if your organization doesn't have a track record, you can't qualify for LIHTC financing. So what ACCI do is, because as a non-for-profit, we're by statute a national organization. We're a 501c3. So we can do business in any state in the union, any territory under the jurisdiction of the United States, and we're offering our support to organizations here and wide to allow them to qualify for those tax credits, and we'll partner with them to do business in their regions. And finally, houses of worship have been our bedrock at HCCI for over 38 years, and we're doubling down on making sure our houses of worship are not being abused by predatory, non-good acting developers. So we ask you not to wait until you get entangled in a deal you can't resolve to consult us. Consult us on the front end, and we'll help you through the process. Finally, we have an initiative called the HCCI 2030, and I am endeavoring to develop 3,000 new homeownership units, and we hope that we can get low-income and moderate-income buyers, and just think of 3,000 units. If we can find buyers that can afford $150,000, $200,000 for those units, we'll have some New York State Affordable Housing Corporation subsidies. The AHC allows up to $40,000 as a subsidy towards your purchase price if you qualify, income-based qualification. That can reduce your real mortgage by $40,000. If we can achieve this 3,000 affordable homeownership units by 2030, we would contribute an additional $450 million to the economy. That is our goal. That's what we're endeavoring to. We're already at $500 million now. We're going to be $1 billion contributor to the economy before 2030. Thank you very much.